Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger. I have with me here Anastasia Leng. She's the founder and CEO of CreativeX. Anastasia, thank you so much for coming on this show. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Anastasia. I'm the founder and CEO of CreativeX, which basically means I do all the jobs that don't have people yet doing them. I'm a former Googler. I spent about 5 years working at Google, worked on every ad tech and analytics product Google had during that time. And this is actually my second startup. The first one was a complete disaster and a failure, but it led me to this. So I guess we'll kind of consider it a latent success.
I'll tell you, I have this saying. I say that it's a trail of tears to the Golden Kingdom, right? Like there's no awesome story. Like, yeah, I had this idea one day and then I told it to one person and then they gave me a bunch of money and then it was a great success and now I'm retired. Like that's never been uttered in the history of entrepreneurship.
It's true. It's true. And you know what's actually funny about this is I found that this idea of having a first company that fails and a second company that is like the phoenix rising from the ashes is actually a pattern of success that investors look for, because I think Slack was born that way. There are a number of other companies that came through this first company failure, second company success. So it's actually sort of a weird badge of honor.
Yeah, no, they want to know. I mean, I've talked to a lot of VCs and honestly, some of them, like the dirty little secret is that they want to know that you've tasted failure. I mean, you look at sports and almost there's a reason why there's only one team in the history of the NFL that ever went undefeated in their season and won the Super Bowl. It's because that basically never happens. For all the undefeated teams, they always eventually get beat and then they lose in the end. But that's because they didn't have that practice. You know, when things got hard, they even though they're professionals, they kind of almost lost touch with what it was like to lose. So they lost touch with what it was like to pivot and be able to overcome, the big adversities. So, and that happens across all sports, right? Like you don't want a perfect season. It's like
of course.
The kiss of death for a championship is to have a perfect season.
Yes, I think you learn so much more from the losses too. But I remember, and this is such a big surprise to me, that when we were raising money for CreativeX, which was then called Picasso Labs, we got a term sheet from an investor. And in it, the terms he gave us were relatively generous, I thought, for a company that didn't yet exist. Mm-hmm. And the way he justified it, he said, well, you're a serial entrepreneur. And I really did not feel comfortable with sort of having that label. And I said, I don't think having one failed company has earned me the serial entrepreneur label. And he said, the biggest thing for us as investors is knowing that you won't give up. And if you've proven that, you've tasted failure and you're still willing to keep going and keep grinding and your team is still with you, that's one of the biggest things we need to de-risk as investors. And you've just done that for us, which I never really appreciated.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you're right. Well, and before we get too far, let's talk about CreativeX real quick. Tell the audience, what is, because now they're like, well, what is it? So what does CreativeX do? What does it do and who does it help?
Yes. So CreativeX is a company that focuses on elevating creative expression through data. So really what that means is we've built technology predominantly for marketers at some of the largest brands in the world to help them make better decisions about all the creative content they're putting out there using data. If you take it one step forward, it basically means we use things like computer vision, optical character recognition, et cetera, to really understand in depth everything contained in their creative content and help them measure everything from brand consistency to representation of talent to adherence to creative best practices and how those decisions that they're making are actually impacting the bottom line.
Okay, so it's a two-part question. The first one is, with what you guys provide, who is your perfect client, right? Like industry, size, capabilities, whatever. And then after that, can you maybe walk us through what it would look like to use your system? So first, who's the perfect client? And then let's get a visual almost on how someone actually uses it.
So the perfect client is, they will tend to be, so let's start with kind of company first and then person second. So the company will tend to be a multinational conglomerate, right? Think of, present in loads of markets, multiple brands under its portfolio. It'll tend to be predominantly B2C, or certainly be in an industry where visual is a big part of how it communicates its value proposition, right? So we really look for companies that have that scale. They tend to be in the Fortune 500 or at least the Fortune 2000.
So like a
and then,
Nike, someone who relies on their brand heavily, something like that?
Exactly. And that's the last part, right? Is brand has to be effectively like a valuable asset on their balance sheet that they really care about preserving. And those are the likes of, Unilever, Heineken, Nike, etc. But that's a company stuff. On the person front, what we tend to see is they tend to be individuals who are very, very data driven, right? They want to bring data to the last frontier, which is the creative, and doesn't have as much data as all the other parts of the marketing funnel. They tend to sit in more centralized functions. So they will oversee a bunch of regions. They will oversee a bunch of brands rather than just focus on one piece. And then from at least in the early days, I think this is starting to change as our product becomes, a little bit more industry standard. But in the early days, they were sort of like the folks who were happy going a little bit rogue. They were like the internal innovators. So they really wanted to be the first ones to test something. They really wanted to bring new technology to the table. They were almost like the entrepreneurs that, hadn't yet started their own companies, but they wanted to do it within this big company environment.
And so what does it look like to use your system? So imagine, I'm the VP of, let's say, branding, and of America, right, for a Fortune 500 company. So I kind of meet all those requirements that you're talking about right there, right? So I log in, and what's my benefit? What do I see in my dashboard kind of thing? Where am I saving time or money, or where am I being more consistent in things? Walk me through that visual so I understand what it's like to even use your software.
Yeah. So you're a VP. Let's say you're a VP of global, because let's go big. If we're gonna fantasize.
Better. I'll take it. I'll take the pay raise.
Exactly. There you go. You've just been promoted. So you're a VP of global. You log into dashboard. What do you see? Well, right off the bat, you see every single creative that all your brands and all your markets are putting out there right now that has media spent behind it. You see what percentage of those creatives are adhering to your creative quality standards, to your brand consistency standards, etc. You see how much money is being deployed on content that meets all your standards and content that doesn't. You see who are the agencies who are spending the most money creating and deploying content that doesn't adhere to your organizational standards. So you can actually see where the bleed is coming from. You see statistically significant correlations between kind of all your creative best practices, all of your brand, kind of distinctive brand elements, something we call DBAs, and digital performance metrics. And you can start to see, hey, as our creative quality score, as our brand consistency score goes up, what happens to some of this performance metrics? So that's one thing you see, right? The other thing that you don't see, but that happens in the background, is what your agencies will see is a tool that allows them to actually test all new content before it goes live through our system to make sure it adheres to all of the brand specific best practices, guidelines, creative learnings, etc., before it even goes out, which gives the VP confidence probably that the organization is starting to march to the beat of the same drum. And this is all automated and in real time.
Wow. So it's not only does it have a check and balance before a filter before it goes out. So I imagine the software is checking for font style, color gradients, right? To make sure all those are on the quality of the picture size, to make sure that it's not too, watered down, and low quality. Those kind of things it's checking for, I imagine, correct?
It's, to be honest, the gamut runs really wide. It can be stuff like that. And those things that you've just mentioned, we see a lot on the brand consistency front. When you're talking about something like creative quality, it's really more adhering to platform specific best practices. So, what is required for a piece of content to be successful on Instagram is different than YouTube, is different than TikTok. And so what we do is we actually figure out what are those creative best practices that are platform specific, and is every piece of content you're running, because there's kind of a big, because there's so much content being produced, we see a lot of recycling. But actually the downside of that recycling is you're putting something that was meant for an Instagram story as a YouTube video, and the dimensions are even completely different, right? So we see a lot of this recycling that actually takes a very negative toll on performance and on a user's ability to really interact with that content. So we see things of that spectrum. We see things of the spectrum you've described. The last thing that we're seeing more and more of now is how do we make sure that when we represent people in our ads, we are telling progressive, authentic stories about the kinds of people we're representing, and we're not inadvertently perpetuating stereotypes. So that's sort of a new use case we're seeing come up more and more.
Well, that's really cool. And what kind of feedback are you getting from new clients, like within that first couple weeks of them using it, right? Like, I mean, like you talked about having, inconsistencies in brand and the bleed and having, how much money are we spending over here where we're not either using the brand at all or not properly? Are they shocked when they go, holy crap, I had no idea? Or is it like, okay, yeah, we figured it was probably somewhere around here, but now we can pinpoint it, which is really valuable. Is it both? I mean, just what kind of reactions are you getting initially?
It's funny because, we've done over 24 of these global deployments. And when I say global, it means for one of these kind of global conglomerates, every brand, every market, et cetera. And it is amazing how consistent it is. That reaction during those first couple of weeks is every time. And the reaction is basically, we had no idea we were spending so much money on content that doesn't, again, remember, we don't make this stuff up. Like, we don't tell them these are best practices and you should follow them. These are things the brand is saying to us, that they're giving us a list of things and saying, these are our best practices, or their Facebook partners giving us the thing saying, this is what it takes for us to be successful on Facebook. Please make sure you and your agency team do this. And so from about, 30 plus of these global deployments, what we've seen is the average creative quality score, right? Meaning the percentage of content that meets all your creative best practices is about 20% when we start, which means that there's literally, in some cases, billions being deployed towards content that doesn't meet your organizational standards for creative excellence, which is a really big shock, right? And I think in reality, most people know, right? Which is why they start having the conversation. They know there is some problem, but they don't know how bad it is. And in fairness, this is not brands being careless or people, sort of not being thoughtful enough. It's just that we've never created as much content as we do today. And the problem is we have to do it faster. We have to memorize all the different things that like YouTube and Facebook and TikTok want done in a different way. It all has to be personalized. Like, there's so many things you have to do as a marketer. It's basically become impossible to do it without technology, because even if you look back a couple of years ago when we had like one, TV campaign we ran for 6 months, marketers were doing some of these similar things, but they were doing them in a human-led way. But with the scale, that's no longer possible.
So let me ask a question. What inspired you to even create this? I mean, most entrepreneurship is born out of frustration, right? You were forced to deal with something that you hated, and you're like, dang it, someone needs to fix this. And then you realize, well, I guess it's going to have to be me. Is that how this company started? Or did you just have some weird light bulb that went off? Like, how did you even come up with the idea to create this?
Well, it goes back to our earlier point about, the importance of failure and learning from failure. So, I wish I could tell you I had this brilliant insight and I saw where the industry was going. We were light years ahead, but no, it was none of that. So my first company was an e-commerce business, and, think of it as kind of like a glorified Etsy. We were selling kind of customizable lifestyle goods. And we started noticing that imagery and video was so important to kind of getting users to not even click on the asset, but come to our site and buy. But we couldn't figure out why some creatives performed really well and others that looked very similar to us and to the naked eye that didn't have the same, that didn't catalyze the same consumer reaction. And as a team of engineers, it drove us crazy that we were making these like very data-backed decisions about everything else, except the creative, which was like finger in the wind, let's conjecture about what's going to work. And so we started trying to think about how do we become more data-driven in our approach to creative decision-making, literally just to solve our own problems, right? Because if you think about our company back then, we're an e-commerce company, very poorly funded. We can't pay to play. We can't compete by like outbidding and all the other tactics. And so, we thought about how do we get smarter, right? And our thesis was you get smarter by having better creative and really understanding what's working from a creative point of view. And so our first iteration was we took a spreadsheet, we put a bunch of images that we were using in the spreadsheet, and we had columns for kind of binary questions we wanted to answer about those images. Was there a person in the image? Yes, no. Is there a product in the image? Yes, no. And we went out and manually, I did a lot of this in the early days, and manually sort of filled out this and then crunched the data and saw what the data said and started making decisions based on that. And that was where the insight came from. Now, of course, the products evolved a lot since then, but the original insight was from trying to save a company that was not working.
It's funny the way you described the initial version of it, like, is this picture this or picture that? I cannot help myself but quote. Do you ever watch Silicon Valley?
Yes. Yeah. Is it a hot dog?
Remember hot dog, not hot dog? He made that.
Yeah, we made hot dog, not hot dog.
For anyone listening who doesn't know what I'm talking about, you got to at least go on YouTube for this part. Basically, Silicon Valley it's this parody on a startup in the Bay Area, and there's this software that one of these guys creates, and all it does is tell you if you take a picture of your food, and all it does is tell you is it a hot dog or not a hot dog. That's it, and he ends up selling it for like $10 million, which is ridiculous or something, right? But I just remember like the way you were describing the beginning stages of it. Hot dog, not hot dog. Yeah. I think
it was definitely hot dog, not hot dog. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Those are our roots, and I'm proud of them.
Let me ask you a question. A lot of the audience here are kind of founders, C-level, our VPs are higher of businesses. And I find that one of the questions that really helps them is to ask my guests, what type of marketing are you doing to get your names out? Obviously you're on podcast, right? So this is one thing. Okay. But
a new thing for us, but yes.
I know, right? Yeah. So what kind of digital marketing are you guys doing that's been successful and what maybe hasn't worked? Any kind of insights you could give the audience as far as kind of what you guys have done that maybe has helped you land those bigger clients?
Yes. So, I'll be honest in saying that the marketing team is something that we've literally just started, I would say a couple of months ago. It's a completely new function for us. And what we realize, and again, this is very specific to us because we work with, very C-level and senior folks at some of the biggest companies in the world. But what we realized is our best marketing was happy customers. And so what we did in the early days is we invested everything we could to make sure that we really listened to their feedback. We were very direct and very transparent about the things we were going to do versus the things we were not going to prioritize and explain the rationale behind that. I still do. I spend a lot of my time in support and talking directly to our partners to understand the issue. And what that led to is when we look at the business, the bulk of our growth has come from two sources: customer referral and someone that we work with at one company, even maybe not directly, but maybe they're using our product as part of one company, moving to another company and then bringing us in. And so happy customers was really sort of our marketing. Now, we've obviously, as we've started to grow more and investor expectations have started to change, we've started to think about building a proper marketing team. And I don't know if I have too many insights to share, but one of the things that we talk about a lot is being true to yourself, right? And being true to your audience. And so for us, we know that the folks that we talk to are, busy people. They get inundated with cold emails and ads and all of that. And we just said, look, we're not going to really play that game. And so what we focused our marketing team on so far is how do we use our tools to create interesting insights from analyzing lots of imagery and video that are actually the kinds of things you might want to talk about at like a dinner party or cocktail party. So, we did analysis of Super Bowl ads, looking at whether or not we got better at diversity, like over the last 5 years by analyzing kind of the most expensive ads in the world during that one day. We looked at whether or not representation of diversity changed post Black Lives Matter in terms of the ads that were being put out in the US. So we're currently doing a piece on NFTs and whether or not how brands are using kind of visual cues in NFTs. So we try to think about kind of data-driven storytelling. That's been our approach so far. And again, it's very true to us and what the company stands for, which is, bringing a little bit of that data into the creative process.
That's really cool. Well, let's talk a little bit now about the future of stuff here. So the first question is, where do you see the industry that you're in? Let's call it, brand software generally, right? For brand protection, things like that. Where do you see that industry, including your competitors, going in the next 5 years? I mean, how do you see it evolving just in general, and being adopted?
Yeah. So, obviously that the reality is no one knows, right? I think I see a couple of different paths from what we're doing and other folks are doing. I think one thing that's happening is there's been such a focus in the digital world on performance optimization, right? Driving for clicks and conversions and all of that. What we're actually starting to see is a little bit less focus on sort of short-term ROI and short-term media metrics, and more of a focus on how does the stuff you're doing impact brand. So one of the things that we're already seeing, this is maybe not too far ahead, is how do you start to measure brand lift through like in a very quick and condensed and like programmatic way, right? And so that's one thing is this, I think the conversation is really starting to shift, at least with the brands we've worked with, from, you know, what's a click-through rate on this to, is this going to make our consumers more likely to consider our product or think favorably of our brand? Because I think there's some consensus that we've moved too far down this like rabbit hole of content optimization and actually moved away from the thing that we've always known drove sales, which is a really strong brand identity.
Yeah, making that connection between the action and the reaction rather than just action all the way down, right? So
that's right. That's right.
Now, so let's hear some teasers about CreativeX, right? So like I said, you know, this probably won't drop for a couple months. You have a little bit of time here between when people hear. But what's coming down the pipeline for you guys? What are some new cool tools or ideas you have or direction that you know you're going in? Like, what can we give the audience that they can look forward to or that might have just dropped by the time they hear this?
So one of the things that we're working on now, which is something that's very close to my heart, is looking at how we can use the technology we have to increase diversity and representation in content and to decrease stereotypical portrayals of people. So one of the things we've realized last year is because of the way we work with brands, all of a sudden we have access to their entire content library. And so we can start to sort of use our tech for good, right? So one of the products we're building is a product that will help our brands not only get a quick sense of, hey, here's when I feature people in my ads, here's how the people I feature break down by gender, by age range, by skin tone. But also more importantly, am I telling different stories about different kinds of people? And are they progressive or regressive stories? So it might be great. Yeah, right. Like, so, you know, I think it's, we want to avoid like a box checking sort of diversity product, but what we're trying to think about is, you know, every brand is really struggling with this. And I think a lot of people we talk to genuinely take this very seriously and want to do some good around this. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how do we help not only kind of help them understand what kind of people they're casting, but also how they're representing them. So it might be great that, you know, 50% of your ads contain women, but if those 50%, 90% of women are being shown in domestic situations, sort of cleaning, cooking, etc., then perhaps that's something you need to think about, right? So we're trying
Especially
to think about.
If there's a single market there too, you know, for singles or anything like that. Now you're showing the wrong types of images to a different demographic.
Yes, but more importantly, you know, it's less even about the kind of the targeting front of it and more about there's a lot of research that's been done that shows that even the way that people are portrayed in ads has a meaningful impact on the way that like younger people might see themselves, right? And there's a lot of research done by a brilliant organization called the Gina Davis Institute, and they've been working on this for a long time. Their focus has been to eradicate stereotypical portrayals in media. They started with film, right? Gina Davis, obviously an actress, and are now also helping the brands do this through ads. But, you know, taking a brand like Unilever or P&G, which are some of the largest advertisers in the world, you know, on a given day, you might see more ads from Unilever than you might watch like Netflix content, right? So there's a lot of time you're spending taking in these portrayals, and the research shows that they do have an impact on how you see yourself. So there's, I think, a broader social element here as well.
What about going the other direction? What about a company uploading its content library? Let's take Mattel, for example, because I believe they own Barbie, right?
Yeah.
So recently, which has been awesome, is they've seen big gains in minority colored Barbies, right? You know, I mean, there's Black Barbies, there's Hispanic Barbies. Like, this was never done before. It was just whitewashed Barbie forever. So if they, let's say, uploaded the images of that, do you see a future where, because you mentioned very specifically how the content might not be tailored to the image properly. So if they were to upload their images of their, let's say their minority looking Barbies, right, or figures in general, and then the content that's behind it was still talking in a way that's clearly geared towards white people, do you see a way for it to not to recognize that and say, listen, you've got this image that isn't matching this tone or this this slang or this, or whatever, right? Do you see it going in the direction where it can start matching and creating suggestions for content with the images so that they actually have a flow, so that you're not talking, to white people while showing a black Barbie or vice versa? Do you see that connection coming in?
So, I'm not sure, right? Because the research on this is actually quite mixed. Facebook just did some, I believe it was Facebook. I don't want to misquote here, but they just did some great research looking at what happens when you show, diverse talent to folks, across the diverse spectrum, right? So should you always show, white people to white people and black people to black people? And the answer is no, right? Like showing diversity of portrayal and showing diversity of people seems to work from their analysis across the board. And one of the things we're very careful to do is to make sure that we're not inadvertently using what we're building to create further stereotypes, so like even things like slang, I think that can be a dangerous road to go down, because then, we don't want to inadvertently say, hey, you use this word, and our technology doesn't do this anyway, so it's not really, not really a direction we would go in. But we're very careful in helping them understand what is the story they're telling. I think technology is not yet at a point where it can make recommendations fully around how we should talk to different kinds of people or what we should show different kinds of people in a way that might not accidentally perpetuate more stereotypes. I mean, the old adage is like, if you put crap in, you get crap out. And the reality is a lot of the training sets here can be biased. And so, that's not a road we're planning to go down yet, because at this point, we just want to help first brands understand where they are, and then give them a way that they can set goals around progressive representation and commit to doing better, and then help them achieve those goals without really making recommendations of here's how you should talk to different people. That's not really our bread and butter, but there are, again, great research institutes that spend a lot more time looking at this qualitatively, like the Gina Davis Institute, who are much better partners for something like that.
So it doesn't sound like something you guys are going to do, but it sounds like it's something that the industry could produce, and hopefully they don't. Hopefully they go farther than hot dog, not hot dog, right?
Hopefully they get away from hot dog, not hot dog. Yes.
Let me ask a question here. So, what is the best, the best piece of advice you've ever been given as a bit, from a mentor or something, business-wise, or the best piece of advice that you can give the audience based on your own experience?
Yeah, I think this probably changes day to day and depends on the moment you catch me in. Something I'm thinking about a lot right now is, and then this probably relates to the best piece of advice I can give at the moment, is really enjoy those early days of creating a company. Because our company went from, we were about 10 people. We were the same 10 people for like 3-4 years. And we went from 10 to 50 in, I think, about the last 12 months, and we're continuing to grow. So, it's not huge, but it feels really big to us, right? And I remember being 10 people and thinking, I can't wait till we're 50 people and we're 100. I can't wait till we hit this revenue threshold. Like, life is going to be so easy then. And I was so focused on where I wanted to go to. But it's funny, now that we're here, sometimes I miss the lack of complexity in the early days, and like the joy of finding product market fit, the joy of like really quick decision. I mean, all of that still happens, of course, but I wish I could almost go back and really enjoy those like family-like days of building something from scratch together.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the it's exciting, right? It's the hunt of it. It's the trying to figure it out, the problem solving. Just really fires your brain off on multiple cylinders, and not that you don't have things obviously to think about and work through now, but no, I get what you're saying. Cause I mean, I've owned my agency for over 10 years, and I remember early days,
Yeah.
when I didn't even know like who was our niche going to be. I mean, we end up, I'm a geek from the Bay Area, and I like B2B, so it ended up being B2B software companies. Okay, great. But before, I mean, we were all over the map because we didn't really know like, what are we going to do? Who are we going to do it for? But it was exciting figuring it out, right?
Yes.
And there's
Yes.
a lot of
Yeah.
ups and downs in it. And now that we're there, like, yeah, we got it. We have different things we work on. But yeah, I do miss a little bit of that exploratory phase of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's probably what kind of I think maybe keeps quote serial entrepreneurs in the serial part of it, right? Because they can restart that over and over. That's why you
Yes.
sell after a certain point or pass it
Yes.
on to a president and then you go create something else, you get back
Yeah.
in the trenches. So that's really cool. I
Yeah.
can appreciate
And
that.
it's really, both are really exciting. And I think there are challenges that I'm really enjoying now, and the luxury to think about certain things that I could only dream that these would be some of the things I'd be thinking about back then. But as a founder and as a CEO, the way I think about my job is to constantly like outsource myself, right, and replace things that I do and hand them off to someone more qualified, more talented, etc. And over the last like year, I've been giving off a lot of the stuff that I've been doing, and sometimes I like product work is something like detailed product work is something that I love doing in the early days. Something I'm still very involved in product, but more at a high level. um, so yeah, I wish I could go back and tell myself like enjoy those days,
Yeah.
because that building stuff, like that is something I think I'll always remember. And I think I wish I would have put a little bit less pressure on myself in the early days.
Well, I think that's really good advice. Listen, Anastasia, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love what you guys are doing over there. How can tell the audience, I guess, how they can get to CreativeX website wise, and then how maybe someone could reach out to you directly if they have a much bigger project for partnership that they want to pitch to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So creativex.com is our website, the word creative, the letter X at the end. I am one of those annoying inbox zero people. So I do actually read every email. I do my best to respond. So it's just my name, Anastasia at creativex.com. Also, LinkedIn is a good way to reach me. So if you Google my name, it should be one of the first things that comes up.
Awesome. Anastasia, thanks again for being on the show. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks for having me.